Since the dawn of time, women are all around the world have been seen as inferior to men. Now, we've come a long way since then, however, and men and women now in our society more or less have equal rights. One of the big reasons why this is by the work of one person named Susan B. Anthony. Anthony was a huge supporter of women's rights and freedoms, and she worked tirelessly all her life to support the cause. Women around the world can thank her for her efforts.
To end slavery. They also were part, which was called the movement of abolitionists. They were also part of the temperance movement, which the production of alcohol would be limited or completely stopped. And that time when I was when we were campaigning against the alcohol, I got inspired to fight for women's rights. I was denied the chance to speak in a temperance convention because I was a woman. I realized later that no one would take women seriously in politics, at least if we had the right to vote. I work next to Elizabeth Cady Stanton. We both founded the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869. Both Elizabeth and me created and produced The Revolution, a weekly publication that lobbied for women's rights. Later, we both edited 3 volumes of History of Women's Suffrage. I took matters in my hands in 1872 when I voted in the presidential election illegally. I was arrested and tried unsuccessfully to fight for the charges that were against me. I ended up being fined with $100 fine, but I never paid it.
Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. You know, another great reformer in the women's rights movements in the antebellum era was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Now, Stanton was probably most famous for organizing the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848 and drafting the Declaration of Sentiments, which called for women's suffrage and the right to divorce.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I was born in Johnstown, New York in 1815. In my early life, my father favored my brother over me, which inspired me to excel in academics and other male aspects of life. In 1832, I graduated from Emma Williard's Troy Female Seminary. This was where I established my beliefs on the women's rights movement. Along with Lucretta Mott and several other women, I organized the Seneca Falls Convention in July of 1848. This was where I read my Declaration of Sentiments, which was a call for women's rights such as suffrage and divorce.
Man, I feel like a woman.
Fun fact, when I married Henry Stanton in 1840, I omitted the word obey from the marriage oath. After meeting fellow reformer Susan B. Anthony in 1850, we began to work together to develop women's rights. In 1868, we created The Revolution, a militant weekly newspaper about women's rights. Then we formed the National Suffrage Association, where I was president for 20 years. Later, we combined that with another suffrage group to create the National American Women's Suffrage Association, where I was president for 2 years. Susan and I wrote the first 3 volumes of A History of Women's Suffrage.
You know, one of the biggest issues for women's rights in the antebellum era was the right to free and equal education for women. Now, Elizabeth Blackwell was the first woman to ever graduate from medical school. A woman in medical school. Sounds like a joke, right? Well, that's exactly what the college that accepted her thought. They thought it was a joke. But now, the joke's on them, isn't it?
My name is Elizabeth Blackwell. I was born in England, but I moved to America when I was 11 years old. My father, who was very involved in social reforms such as the abolitionist movement, moved us around a lot, but we eventually settled in Cincinnati. Growing up in Cincinnati was where I first discovered my passion for medicine. My mother and sister and I built a private school there, and I became very interested in education and obviously the medical field. As I grew older, I lived in Kentucky and North and South Carolina, teaching all across the states. Then, I believe it was in 1847, I began to look for my first medical school. It's true that I was rejected by 29 different schools until finally Geneva and New York accepted me as a joke. But I soon proved to them and to my family and to everyone that it was not a joke and that I was serious about medicine. Naturally, it was hard at first. I was the only woman in the entire college, and I wasn't allowed to attend classroom demonstrations. But I soon proved to everyone and worked very hard and gained the respect that I deserved. Being the first woman to graduate from medical school was obviously a huge success. I mean, most women didn't go to school or didn't get a basic education at all, let alone college. That was unheard of. But I had no doubt that I could do it, and I have no doubt that other women can do it too. And I just know that in the future women will be working alongside and even above men in all different fields, not just medicine. Society should never make women feel as though they are in any way lesser than men. If society will not admit to women's free development, then society must be reformed.
Well, there you have it. You know, before, women were only good for two things: children and food. But today, look how far we've come. We live in a world where women have an equal opportunity to do everything that men can do. Somewhat, you know. There's always some outliers, but for the most part, women and men are relatively equal now. And we can thank three main people for that. We can thank Elizabeth Cady Stanton, we can thank Elizabeth Blackwell, and we can thank Susan B. Anthony. Now, I think that if we all work together and we join our efforts, we can work to end world hunger. Thank you.
That's all, folks.
Ducky! Ducky, ducky, ducky!